Hi, everyone. Welcome to our fireside chat. Thanks for joining us, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. My name is Ashley Minogue, and I am the Director of Growth here at OpenView. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items before we dive into our chat with Amy. So first, we're going to reserve some time at the end for Q&A. So as questions come up, you should be able to see a chat box on the lower left-hand side of your screen. So please, at any point throughout this discussion, just enter your questions in there, and we will be sure to take as many as we can. And then secondly, we are going to record this, so we'll send it out in the next couple of days. Whether you want to refer back to this or send to someone else on your team, you'll be able to do that. So for those of you who may not know, OpenView is a venture capital firm that focuses on investing in expansion stage software companies. And our expansion team is dedicated to helping our portfolio companies post-investment acquire, retain, and grow the right customers and talent. Real quickly on my background before we dive in here, as I mentioned, I am the Director of Growth on our expansion team. So I partner with our portfolio companies to build scalable go-to-market strategies, which includes everything from customer acquisition to product monetization to customer success. And my previous background was leading a B2B market strategy over at Wayfair.com. So today I have the pleasure of chatting with Amy Vetter, CRO at Xero, on the topic of delivering exceptional customer service at scale. So I know, and I'm sure many of you can relate, customer engagement is certainly one of the most important focus areas to achieving and maintaining efficient growth. And I think probably what makes it such a fun and challenge is that it's definitely a broad topic with a lot of different levers you can pull, and is something that evolves as your business grows and evolves. So I'm thrilled to have Amy joining us today because she's certainly well-versed in how to drive customer engagement and adoption at scale. So to kick us off, Amy, I'd love for you to give just a quick background on yourself for everyone dialing in case they aren't familiar.
Sure. Well, thanks a lot for having me today. Excited to interact with those that tuned in today as well. I am a CPA. My background is that I majored in accounting, had my MBA. I started in a traditional accounting career, being in the Big Four and public accounting, and I eventually opened my own accounting practice where I didn't focus on tax or audit. I focused on advisory services much before it was a main service line in the accounting industry as it's starting to become today. And was out there doing training and education for my clients and did that for 10 years. I was a partner in a CPA firm as part of that. I also was a partner in a national company where we served franchises as well to try to make the training repeatable. And so learned a lot along the way. I've consulted with thousands and thousands of small businesses at this point. But as my career developed, I grew up with my grandfather owning a CPA firm. My mom owned maid services. My grandmother owned antique dealers. So being an entrepreneur was really in my blood. And when I opened my own practice, I realized, how needed it was to help these businesses really turn around their cash flow. They had no one to ask questions to. They were just getting an income statement and a balance sheet from their accountant, but no explanation of what that meant and how they could really make an impact on their business. And when I started being a speaker and training, I realized I was speaking to many accountants, but when you think about scale, accountants represent many small businesses, each one of them. And so when I was training them, I started realizing if I turn the light bulb on with them, then it helps hundreds or thousands of small businesses, not just one-to-one like I was doing in my business. So I eventually started working for Intuit, where I was helping them grow their accounting practices and advisory services. I then led a team at Intacct, which is a cloud accounting software for mid-market companies, where I led education, sales, and marketing there. And then Xero came into the U.S. about, I would say probably about 6 years ago. And a little over 4 years ago, I joined Xero because it was very exciting to me as an entrepreneur to take this company and help them scale on a very small budget that we had in the United States and make an impact. So it's been a really fun transition over my career, and I've just kind of taken that opportunity as long as it resonated with my personal purpose of what I've been trying to accomplish to help small business owners.
That's great, Amy. I mean, it's clear from all the different roles you've had from starting as an accountant to having your own practice to, the many different companies you work with to your current role. I'd love to hear a little bit more about, really what drove your transition to your latest role and really what you and your team are focused on today at Xero.
Sure. So originally, as I really got into the tech sector, I was helping consult with many of these companies about how to sell to CPAs. So, many of the businesses that are startups, you need to think about who you're selling through, not necessarily selling to. So when you think about accounting software, you majority of the time need to convince the decision maker, which is the accountant, in order to get them to convince their clients to go on another software. So you can sell directly to a small business owner, but that's very one-to-one, versus when you sell to an accountant, you're selling to see if you can get a lot of their clients onto your platform. And this applies to many different industries, whether it's web designers, attorneys, when you think about who actually has the main decision for those clients, that is who you really want to target, not necessarily the end game. And so I really found it fascinating where in my small business, in my own practice, I loved selling and really transforming these businesses. And so I was brought in really to help these technology companies speak in a different way to accountants, not from a marketing speak way, but in their real experience, what they're experiencing every day, and how we help their pain points, because I've lived it. I know what they go through and how they're trying to grow their practices. So many of the programs that I've developed over time are from the perspective of how would an accountant want to learn, how would an accountant want to engage, what makes an accountant excited about what they do, and help these companies really grow their customer base by engaging with customers in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And I think you have a really unique perspective in that, you've lived it. You have sat in their seat and really understand really what their pain points are, what excites them, what their challenges are. One thing I'm wondering is, for those who don't have that luxury of actually having that unique experience, what advice might you have for people to really get in the heads of their customers? And if they haven't had the opportunity to truly live it, what are some ways that they can, really start to understand that voice of the customer?
I think that's a great question, and it is one of the questions that that has definitely, from me being the customer's viewpoint, has been one of those debates when I go into these companies, because a lot of times tech companies believe that they need to design something that someone doesn't know they want, which that is absolutely true. Like, there is a portion of that that's absolutely true. However, you can't ignore the voice of the customer. And it's really, really important that you're bringing in the subject matter expertise, you're doing the customer research, and you're making sure that you're actually solving their pain points. So, what doesn't happen enough a lot of times is actually going in and being silent, going into the customers that you are trying to attract and really watch how they work, listen to their interactions with their customers, be a fly on the wall, where you can actually map out, okay, if I, develop this new tool or this new enhancement in my product, I'm going to save them so much time, or I'm going to bring them more revenue. What am I going to do to help them from their perspective? And so if you haven't done it yourself, it is important to contract with somebody that has lived that life of the customer, because secondly to that is when you go and interview those customers and you've never been in their industry, a lot of times what I see is the researchers go in and ask the questions, but because they don't really understand why the customer is saying what they're saying, then they can't really dissect it. They just take that answer and say, oh, that's the problem. But, for instance, if I'm in a room with an accountant and I hear them say a pain point to a, product researcher or so forth, I know the next 3 questions to ask them to try to get to the root of the problem that they're saying. And so it's really important to offset that experience so that you're not just skimming the surface and really not solving the actual problem.
Mhm. Yeah, it sort of reminds me of the peel the onion concept of not just taking everything at face value, but doing the due diligence to dive in layers deeper. That's great.
Yeah, and getting the right expertise to help you do that.
Right. So a common theme that I've seen across companies today, which I'm curious to get your take on, is that I think what I see is that at a lot of companies, everyone sort of thinks that they own the customer relationship, whether it be across sales, marketing, customer success, various different groups. And I think what ends up happening is it leads to a lot of often uncoordinated touch points with the customer, and no one's really having that holistic view of the customer journey and all the different touch points that customer is having with the company. So what's your take on that? I'm curious if you've experienced that, and who do you think should really be quarterbacking that customer relationship, in your opinion?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that problem over and over again, and it causes confusion for the customer. I absolutely think the account manager or a sales rep or who's ever assigned to that customer is the quarterback. No one owns a customer relationship. It should be a team approach. But what doesn't happen enough is these roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, where people don't cross over and duplicate work. Instead, they're fighting over, well, that's my job or that's my job, where there should be an agreement, just like a sports team, of what does each player play in that customer relationship. And there needs to be that quarterback that is actually talking to the customer and giving them that journey and allowing them to choose their path. Because another mistake I think that happens is that, you try to define that path for them, but everybody learns differently. Everybody's got different business concerns. So you have to really make sure that you have flexible options for the way people want to learn, for the way people want to onboard, and be able to have that business discussion, which should be the account manager. So the way I see the account manager is introducing all of their teammates and then knowing when to keep popping back in of like, oh, okay, now you've done this learning. Let's take the next step is X. And, and definitely the marketing team and anyone doing customer research can help with putting that customer journey together, but the input should be from everyone because everybody's got different viewpoints on what that customer is experiencing. And then lastly, making sure you validate that customer journey with the customer as well, that it's not just an internal decision on how that would work, that you're actually talking to the customers like, would this work for you, or what do you think we're missing here that you would really need?
I think that's a great point. That last point of making sure you're actually validating it and getting that confirmation actually from the voice of the customer is a great point. So on that note, I'm curious if you have any more tactical tips and tricks on how you stay in sync with all the different various stakeholders, whether it's, is it a standing recurring meeting that's cross-functional? Is it more priorities being set at the beginning of the quarter? What do you think's worked well for you at Xero?
I definitely think setting priorities that all line up together is really important cross-functionally. So, from the top, there needs to be a strategy that everybody knows they're marching to. And the important part of that strategy is not only what you're going to do, but what you're not going to do. So, if somebody, gets a new idea and it's not part of the strategic initiatives of the company, then it needs to come back to, okay, does this align with our strategic goals? And if it doesn't, let's, put this on the list for next year to discuss it, because I think when you're in the startup mode, it's really hard to say no to things because you're just excited and you want to try to take advantage of every opportunity. But when you're spread too thin, that really can cause issues for you as a company of actually achieving anything. So when you have that tone at the top and you get feedback from the teams of, as you're going through that process, it shouldn't just be the leadership team. It should be going back to the teams and saying, what I've done with my teams is basically say, let's go through what we think are the goals for this year. And we actually divide it by what are the table stake things that we just need to do in order to do our job function, but also what are the things that we want to take chances on, so that we know there's still always research of like, how do we always stay ahead? How do we always have that innovative thinking, that no one gets too stagnant? But you dedicate a certain amount of time to that. So that's not like the full amount of time, on those new initiatives. It's making sure you're still delivering great service, and on the things that you're trying, that you're iterating very fast, and when it's okay to fail, and say, and I don't love the word fail. When things are going off the rails, that you stop it and go, okay, what do we need to shift right now, and make it work. But and then take that to your team. So I'll have the leadership team all come together and decide what we think we need to do, and then I have them take it back to their teams, and then have the teams give input of is there anything we missed? Do they agree with the prioritization? Let them vote on the prioritization as well, and then we bring it all back together and then have an agreement. And that way the staff, the team feels comfortable with those outcomes and what they're doing on a daily basis and understand why, and feels like they're doing fun stuff as well and really expanding their learning too.
Definitely. I think that's an important point to stress, of getting everyone's input in order for them to feel like they've been a part of the process and actually are bought in and excited about the plan that's in place.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about how at Xero you guys have evolved your customer engagement and adoption initiatives. I definitely think you've seen tremendous growth and really have probably been ahead of the curve in thinking about ways to drive customer adoption, and whether that's on a one-to-one level or a one-to-many level, really thinking about how to drive and address those customer needs. So can you talk a little bit about how that has evolved at Xero as you've, even your group, I think, is a great example of ways that you guys are trying to drive customer adoption and engagement. But I'd love to hear your take on what you've seen over your tenure there.
Sure. So, coming into Xero, obviously, we're against a very large incumbent being into it in this market. And so getting word of mouth is really, really important, because we don't have the budget that Intuit does to have a Super Bowl commercial or, have the radio or TV campaigns that they do. So it's important to us to figure out ways that we can get that message out that helps us to stand apart and also lets people know about us. in ways that aren't, that doesn't need a ton of money. And so in the beginning, when I came on to Xero, I was responsible for global education in all of our countries that we were in. And so, each of those countries are at a very different stage. Some are market leaders, some are fighting for market leadership, and then you've got like the startup markets more in the Americas, like we are here. And, one thing that I wanted to do as far as the global education role was to make the experience of education so different that it would stand it apart and other people would be talking about it to other accountants. Because at the end of the day, there's this peer-to-peer communication, and, one thing in most industries, whether it be churches, whether it be accountants, whether it be universities, whatever it is, in those markets or verticals, they are talking to each other, and a lot of times, saying, oh, I have this or I have that, and then somebody else says, oh, I want what you have. So you want people talking about it. So I really stepped back and rethought how education should be, and knowing how busy the accountant is and how we could really innovate on education. And one of the things we did, which was definitely first in the accounting industry market, was take away a test for certification. So every technology company is trying to get customers certified on their technology, but one thing is that, accountants don't have a lot of time. They need to get that expertise, but they need to get it as far as there's a lot of different roles in an accounting practice. So there's someone that's doing the data entry, there's someone that's reviewing work, there's someone that's doing more CFO work. So it's really important to start breaking up the content to make sure it's role-based, that people can pick the path that they want to learn that has to do with their job so it's interesting and they can apply it to real life. And taking away the test, I just had a lot of activities start being built into the content so people were learning as they go, reinforcing their education, and that's how they were passing each module by completing those activities, but doing it in a fun way rather than, dreading this test and, when someone fails a test and they feel bad about themselves or the company, like how can you change that feeling to make it fun?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about changing their mindset into the initiative they're working on. So on that note of education, clearly it's something you're really passionate about and, started your time at Xero really focused on. There's a lot of different elements to education. I think it's a pretty broad term when you think about it at a given software company. So how do you think about the process of, onboarding a customer or a partner versus ongoing enablement that's more related to maybe product adoption or new releases or even trying to drive more usage? How do you think about how education should vary across those sort of two broader segments?
So, depending, it's all a business discussion. And again, when you're trying to sell in a one-to-many relationship, you need to definitely carve out like what you're going to provide based on the financial commitment someone's making to your product, and make some business decisions there, not give everything for free. You want commitment from the customer. And if they're not willing to commit, what would the value of that be if they wanted to pay for it because they don't want to make a commitment? And there really should be a value put on things, because when something's free, that's the perception, right, that it's not of value. So you've got to figure that out. One of the other things that I did with education is we also had a recertification test. So everything was a test. So take the initial certification, and then every year to learn, what's going on with new product features, you take a recertification test, which ended up, people weren't really learning. They were like forcing us in to take this test every year and only coming back to education once a year. So what we did is come up with something called Xero U credits, where if they attend events or conferences or other content on our e-learning site, they earn Xero U credits toward their recertification. And, the way we calculate those credits, it's not based, like in accounting terms, if you're getting continuing education, it's based on the number of minutes that you're taking something. We don't do that. We give more credits to content of things we want to push them towards. So it becomes its own currency, right? Like if I can get 5 credits taking this piece of content versus 2 on another, I'll probably take the 5 credits, and we really want to push them toward that content so that they're learning it and seeing it. So it was a new type of way to really try to engage the customer in continuous learning and getting more involved in our events and our conferences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that point about thinking about multiple formats for learning. I think so often people just think of traditional sort of like online content, but the point you made about it's more than that, it's events, and there's lots of other creative ways you could think about driving customer education and adoption. It's something to definitely keep top of mind. So I have one other topic I definitely want to hit on, and then we can open it up to the group for some of the questions coming in. I want to make sure we hit on metrics for a moment. So as I'm sure a former accountant, you love your metrics as well. So can you share with the group like a little bit about your day-to-day? What are some of the key metrics that you're using to measure not only the business, but your team in particular, and the health of your customers and partners?
Sure. I mean, again, it depends on the type of event or education we're delivering, but overall, absolutely number one is Net Promoter Score. I'm a strong believer in Net Promoter Score, and if you're not using Net Promoter or don't know what that is, that really measures customer loyalty and referral. So, the question basically is, would you recommend this course or content, to a colleague, a friend, a family member? And it's a very simple question, but it means so much because, again, if you're trying to get that word of mouth and get people engaged with your content and what you do, you need them, like it's not just for them to go, oh, that was really good. It's for them to be like, oh, I want to tell everybody how awesome that was or how awesome it is to work with this company and be excited about it and have an experience with it, not just an encounter. And so, overall that would be the biggest key metric that we monitor, but obviously we look at, how an accounting firm is growing and the number of clients that they're adding to Xero over time to know, like, which pieces of content or enablement is helping them move faster along that customer journey as well. So it's important to really understand, going back to that customer journey, understand it so that you can actually measure which things are working and which aren't, and don't keep doing the things that aren't working. Find something else to do or eliminate it.
For sure. And then the other thing I would stress there is, so I think it's common for someone who's owning customer success or customer education to be looking at NPS. But the thing I would add is, like, it's critical that all departments are looking at that metric. Like sales, marketing, even if marketing is focused on top of the funnel, that like that should be the metric that everyone is rallying around, because you're right, that is truly like the end-to-end metric that's really telling you how your customers feel about your product.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So let's turn it over to questions. We've gotten a couple from the group here that I want to hit on. So first is around, who do you look to in the market as a leader in terms of customer education or driving customer adoption?
I feel like we are a leader. So I've been, a part of many companies. I think most are very traditional in their education, and that's not really an experience or something else that sets them apart, that engages them with the customer. It's just something they have to do, or it's an afterthought. One of the things that really made me excited about Xero in the first place, I was leaving a sales role when the opportunity came here to lead global education and then the other things that I've done at Xero. And we always had this mantra of recruit, educate, grow. And so because we said that, that was a huge recruiting factor for me, because it's not just about acquire the customer and then let them flail. It's about, education being a key piece to that customer journey. And so I don't feel like a lot of companies it's kind of like this cost number that they have to do. It's this redheaded stepchild in the company, and there's not a lot of focus on it. But when you deliver it well, it completely changes the customer experience, and people have a different feeling about the product or the company because they're being supported so well.
And I think probably why you've been able to do it so well is truly understanding those different needs and segments within your customer base. I think when I look out at the market and companies that I've worked with that do it well is like they're not trying a one-size-fits-all approach, and they're thinking about how those needs might vary by their key customer segments.
Absolutely.
So another question we've gotten is some secrets to success here. Are there any, strategies you've implemented or any even specific tools that you have found have been really instrumental in making you guys a leader in terms of customer experience?
I would say it's more our processes. We have the typical tools in our company of Salesforce and, working, through other applications through Google, which I think Google was, when I first got here, we were on Microsoft, and when we switched to Google and had that collaboration, that was huge. That really made things more real time. The other thing, we've recently implemented, we used to use Yammer, we're now on Slack, and I think that really, being a global company, it doesn't matter if you're not sitting right next to somebody. You can start making relationships or reaching out to people that you would never know or encounter and feel like you know somebody. And I would say the same for using video for your meetings. Like when I switched from phone conferencing to video chat, like it's funny, you might not have ever met someone in person and then you finally meet them and you feel like you know them. And it really, that eyeball perspective of, really getting to know somebody, it doesn't matter if you're remote or not. It's changed all of that. But I would also say, we've done some things to really get local in markets where really focusing our marketing dollars around, certain geographies or verticals rather than trying to go horizontal, because we don't have the kind of budget to go horizontal. I mean, not that we don't have some budget for that, but when we're completely laser focused on a part of a geography or a vertical, those customers know like we're in it for them and we care. And so, we've got whole teams living in, multiple cities that are doing education, sales, enablement. And then we also engage our subject matter experts, which are our accountants, to be out in those areas as well, running events and being a thought leader in those areas so that, new customers coming on have someone to talk to that's been successful on our platform and feel more comfortable with the decision that they're making.
Great. And so we'll take two more questions from the audience here. One is around, do specific examples come to mind of maybe interesting or innovative ways that Xero has helped accounting firms grow their own business more effectively?
So some of the tactics have been actually providing education that have absolutely nothing to do with the software. It's all about change management. So we developed content that helped them with business planning and what it actually means to start up a new service line. When you think about a lot of the things we do as technology companies, we're trying to, either change their business to be better in a new way, be better, or develop new service lines that they've never been into before and create new revenue. And so one of the things we really dedicate our time to is helping them think through all the business decisions they need to make and the investment they need to make in their business. Like Xero isn't the biggest investment they need to make. They need to make an investment in time of actually doing the change management in their businesses to be able to deliver services in another way. If you deliver your accounting services the exact same way with Xero, you didn't build any efficiencies. You're not taking advantage of the power of that platform. So really spending time with them and being a consultant from a business perspective has made a huge impact in speeding up their growth because else they just have nowhere else to look or no idea how to get there.
Right, so building more of a knowledge sphere around the many different topics and challenges they're facing.
That affect your customer, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. So last question that we'll take from the group here is, we're in January, new year, new start. What are some big initiatives for you this year? And I'm curious if there's any big predictions you have in terms of key trends relating to customer experience and customer education.
Well, I think for definitely our segment, the biggest key trend is artificial intelligence and machine learning that's affecting the accounting industry. It's affecting many industries, but because accounting is such a structured base of data, it's ripe for artificial intelligence and machine learning and really coming up with ways to fully take advantage of the cloud and how they can be even more efficient. And so there's a good and a bad with that and it's affecting so many industries, is like every profession has fear that means their jobs are going to be taken away, which isn't the case. But what is the case is they need to retool and think about the future of what does their job role or job skills need to transform to. And so I think that is one of the biggest trends this year, really helping our customer base get to that next level, get them ready for all these changes that are happening in the profession, and it's going to happen faster than they're probably ready. And for some, it's a little terrifying because they've built these accounting practices for 25, 30, 40, 50 years ready to retire, and they're not going to be able to retire and have someone take over unless they make these really needed changes in their practice. So we're definitely trying to be side by side with them and help them, jump that chasm to get to the other side.
Mm-hmm. And I was sitting here nodding my head because that point you made is truly applicable across many different industries. I know for our portfolio companies and the various segments they serve, that's definitely something that is top of mind for them as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know we could go on and talk about customer experience and customer education for quite a while here, but I know everyone's got their day jobs to get back to. So Amy, first and foremost, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing your experiences. And also thanks everyone in the audience for joining us and for sending in all those great questions. As I mentioned at the start, we're going to send out the recording in the next couple of days, but of course if additional questions come up, you can certainly reach out to us and we'll help facilitate getting those answered for you. In terms of other upcoming fireside chats and webinars, definitely check out our events page for future events coming down the pipeline. And if you're curious about getting more information on customer education or customer success or really all the relevant topics in terms of building your startup, you can subscribe to our newsletter at lab.openview.com. So thank you, Amy, and thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Please stand by.